It is a little after 11:30. Thank you so much for joining us. Priscilla Benitez.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. This is a trigger warning. This presentation may contain triggering and/or sensitive material. Sexual violence, sexual assault, and abuse are some topics mentioned within this event. If you feel triggered, please feel free to step away from the presentation, and resources are available to help you on the chat.
All right. Priscilla, thank you so much for that. And the resources will be sent into from Larry over to Joanna, and she'll be posting them throughout the presentation. Lynn Suh.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Before we start, we want to let everyone know that we will have a time dedicated for questions towards the end of the session. If you want to respond to something during the session, please use the chat or reactions feature. We kindly ask that you mute yourselves while the presentation is happening. This is a platform of mutual respect and mutual understanding. If there's something that you believe needs to be discussed, please message the host privately. And as stated by the Zoom voice, recording is in progress.
Thank you so much, Lynn. So yeah, let's get started. Let's get this conversation going. My name is Flavio Medina Martin. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for College of the Canyons. It is an absolute honor to be presenting on this sensitive and very important topic as we wrap up our various campus events associated with Diversity Month awareness at College of the Canyons. Today, we thank you for joining us in our Sexual Assault Awareness Series, Part 2, Where Do We Go From Here? In today's session, we will discuss various ways we can invoke and infuse advocacy for self, advocacy as an institution, and advocacy as a bystander when we encounter behaviors associated with sexual misconduct and sexual assault. We will also discuss the impact of films such as Audrey and Daisy, The Hunting Ground, and Athlete A in bringing awareness to college campuses. We will talk about various facts and myths about how we view sexual assault and what we can do as individuals to change the narrative on sexual assault on how we treat others. For today's discussion, we will have special guests from Santa Clarita Valley's Child and Family Center Domestic Violence Program and members from our College of the Canyons team. So team, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. First name, last name, Leah Parker. I'll start with you.
Thanks, Flavio. As Flavio mentioned, my name is Leah Parker. I am with Child and Family Center's Domestic Violence Program. I'm an outreach specialist here, which means that I do prevention and education throughout the Valley regarding topics centered around domestic violence, sexual violence, bullying, ranging from the ages all the way from 3rd grade up to adulthood. So I'm very excited to be here and sharing this discussion with you today.
Thank you so much. Larry Schallert. Larry, you're muted.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Larry Schallert. I coordinate our personal counseling program at College of the Canyons.
Thank you so much. Catherine Parker.
Hi, everyone. As Flavio mentioned, my name is Catherine Parker. I am a researcher at College of the Canyons, and I'm also a psychology instructor. And I'm so happy that you all are taking the time to be here with us today to talk about this topic. This topic is very near and dear to my heart. So yeah, so I appreciate all of you being here.
Thank you. April Barkus.
Hi guys, I'm April Barkus. I'm the ASG Public Affairs Officer, also a topic that's really close to my heart. So I'm really honored to be part of the planning of this, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Joanna Kelly.
Hi everyone, my name is Joanna Kelly. Thank you all for joining us today. Same thing, this is a topic really close to my heart as well. I'm the Student Services Coordinator here for the Office of Campus Life and Student Engagement, specifically at the Canyon Country campus. I'm one of the ASG advisors. I see some of our lovely officers here today. And I also oversee the Office of Campus Life here at Canyon Country campus. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna, Lynn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn Suh. I'm a Student Services Coordinator here at the Valencia campus for the Campus Life and Student Engagement Office. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lynn. and Priscilla Benitez. And let's talk a little bit of the why, Priscilla. In addition to your introduction, just give us an overview as to why is it important for us as a campus to engage in these discussions about sexual assault awareness?
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Priscilla Benitez. I am an LMFT, and I'm also the mental health supervisor at the Student Health and Wellness Center. And so today we're going to discuss, or I'm going to discuss the why it's important to talk about this. Sexual assault or sexual abuse is an important issue to address in society and on college campuses because sexual assault can happen to anyone, regardless of race, age, gender, or sexual orientation. And cultural differences can place blame and embarrassment on survivors, which may result in survivors keeping quiet about the sexual assault. In most cases, the survivor engages in self-blame and can develop long-lasting physical and psychological trauma. Depression, social isolation, and low self-esteem are some common symptoms that result from sexual assault. Sexual assault is a growing epidemic in our society and on college campuses, and this needs to be addressed. Students may find themselves or others in a sexual assault situation and need to know that there are resources available to them. We need to do better.
Priscilla, thank you so much. And yeah, so there's so many different reasons why, people don't end up reporting rape to law enforcement. There's a reason, various reasons why people stay in abusive relationships. So let's engage in some conversation about that in just a bit. But now that we know who our panel members are, let's see who our participants are. I'm going to launch a few polls, a few questions on some myths and some facts about sexual assault. Let's go ahead and launch the polls. And let me know, can you all see the polls? Yeah. Okay, so let's get started. Lynn, let's go ahead and ask. I'll ask the first question and we can just kind of run through and ask these other questions. So now who's in the room? If you're a student, mark that you're a student, faculty, classified confidential, college assistant, community member, or management. Lynn, question number 2.
Sexual assault won't happen to me or to anyone I know. Is this a myth or a fact?
Joanna, question 3.
I actually don't have it in front of me.
Oh no.
Oh,
Okay.
yes, I do. Yes,
Yeah.
I do. Sexual assault is provoked by the victim's actions, behaviors, or by the way they dress.
Cool. Thank you. April, myth 4.
Men don't get
Is
raped.
that the answer?
Myth or fact?
Okay. Larry, 5.
LGBTQ plus community members are more likely to experience sexual assault.
All right. Priscilla, 6. You think you're muted, Priscilla?
When it comes to military sexual assault, more men are sexually assaulted than women. Myth.
All right. Catherine, 7.
All right, there we go. What are some reasons victims do not report being raped to law enforcement? And correct, all of the above. We have 2 individuals who indicated that, right? So there's a concern for not being believed. There's the embarrassment and shame factor, the fear of being blamed due to our rape culture, fear of it happening again, retaliation, bullying. So all of those above.
All right. Thank you. And Leah, number 8.
Last question is, why do people stay in abusive relationships? There are a number of reasons, and you guys are all answering pretty straight on right there. There's a bunch of reasons. There's a lack of financial stability without that person, fear of losing their status if they leave the relationship. Immigration status is a huge one that we see very often. Clinging to that honeymoon phase. Again, they love that person. The relationship started off golden and beautiful and rainbows and butterflies and all this wonderful stuff. And next thing you know, they're entering into these other stages, and there's always that hope that someone may change and go back to that stage. Fear of being alone, manipulating, gaslighting is a really, really big one. Again, it feels safe, it's familiar, it's something that they know, and it's their normal. So yeah, all of these things and then some, which I'm sure we'll get into the discussion throughout the day. But yeah, absolutely, you guys did a great job with this.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Can you all see the results? Yeah.
Yes. So can we talk about, are we going to talk about
Yes.
these all again? Or are we going to?
Yeah, let's see some of these results. Ben Larry, yeah, just chime in. So who's in the room? The majority are students and classified. Sexual assault won't happen to me or anyone I know. Myth, perfect. Yeah, 100%. Sexual assault is provoked by the victim's actions, behaviors, and by the way they dress. Myth, yeah, definitely it's a myth. Men don't get raped. Myth, yeah, great job. LGBTQIA members are more likely to experience sexual assault. So Lara, do you want to jump in on this one? We got 33% said it's a myth and 67% said it's a fact.
Well, this is actually a fact. All statistics show that LGBTQ plus community members are more likely to experience sexual assault than cisgender people.
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot we can talk about, but on that one, just to know,
All right.
the more vulnerability because of all kinds of reasons.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And 6, when it comes to military sexual assault, more men are sexually assaulted than women. 83% said it was a myth and 17% said it was a fact. Larry, do you want to talk a little bit about this one?
Yeah, so that's actually a fact. More men are sexually assaulted in the military than women. It's a little bit of a trick question because there's lots more men in the military than there are women. And military sexual assault is a huge problem. And it's a huge problem for women. And we hear more about that in our counseling programs and that sort of thing. But a lot of times we don't hear it even from women, but we hear it even less from men. But studies show that men are often sexually assaulted in the military. They just don't talk about it. And they experience all the trauma reactions that anyone else would experience.
And a lot of that, if I can piggyback off of that, goes into a lot of the hazing that we see from authority figures. You know, again, this also goes into sports teams of all kinds, right? As well as these hazing of the rookies, the new recruits and things like that. So that definitely feeds into the truth that this is a fact. And exactly what Larry was saying is it doesn't get reported enough, especially if it's underneath this heading, well, it was just a hazing thing. Like it's very easy for it to get pushed under the rug as opposed to highlighted and the spotlight put on it.
I also see that one person indicated that sexual assault is provoked by the victim's actions, behaviors, or by the way they dress. And so that's what we're going to be addressing primarily today.
Yeah, in fact, you know, I know we have like an outline, but I would love to just kind of talk about this for just a little bit. If y'all don't mind, Catherine, if you want to just take over some of the beginning part of this particular session, I want to talk a little bit and show a video that we have on hand about slut shaming and victim blaming. If you don't mind, I will go ahead and just share my screen for just a little bit.
Do it.
Sorry. Okay.
If I'm laying down with a man butt naked and his condom is on, and I say, you know what? No, I don't want to do this. I changed my mind.
Okay.
That means no.
Right.
That means no. That's it.
Like if you see a basketball
Well,
player
that's-
and he's known as a basketball player, when you see him, you're gonna be like, yo, let's go play ball. Just
Okay.
like it's
If
the
I-
energy that's
if-
being sent out there that creates that type of response.
It doesn't matter how far I take it or what I have on.
No, I
When
wasn't
say
saying-
no,
I-
it means no.
I wasn't say-
If I want to wear a short skirt or a tank top and I'm at the club and I'm having fun with my friends and I feel sexy, I'm not DTF. I'm not even looking at you. I don't even want to have sex with you. I didn't come here to have sex. I'm not asking for nothing.
Okay. Okay.
So that was a short excerpt from that Amber Rose video. So let's talk a little bit about what that means and the kind of impact that those words have on all of us listening. Catherine, take it away. What are your thoughts about that video? What do you think of it, and what's the impact? What's our key takeaway?
Well, I can relate to it. The key takeaway is that it is not, nobody asks for it. Nobody asks for it. And no matter what a woman is wearing, how she is acting, whatever she is, she's not asking for it, and no means no. And it needs to be respected. And I can't stand when I see articles on, when they're talking about women who have been sexually assaulted, when they mention she was inebriated. It's like, that doesn't matter. It does not matter.
Yeah, and there's a piece to that the interview kind of came in a little bit after this, where one of the gentlemen she was talking to says, look, I was always taught, like, dress the way you want to be treated. And it's like, well, no, that goes against exactly what we're saying. That, again, if it shouldn't matter if I do want to walk outside. If I walk out my door completely nude, that is not an invitation. That is my choice in that way. And the same thing is kind of what she was saying there is, what somebody wears should be no invite for any type of response in that way. And again, whether she's at the club, whether she's at work, whether she's at school, a person's clothing has no right to say, well, I could basically see everything anyway, so it's free game. No, that is so far from the truth. So I love this interview, and I love what Catherine is sharing there in terms of, it leads into this victim blaming, where it's no longer the actions of the abusive party. It is now like, well, you brought it on yourself. And now it's just shame, shame, shame. And that's so unhealthy and just creates this whirlwind of emotion that we're going to get into a little bit later with the effects and the impact that it has. But yeah, it's just so crazy how quickly people jump to, well, what did you do? In the language and the verbiage there. So it's a very good interview. And if you're interested to see the whole thing, feel free to look it up and see that. But I'm glad that we started there, because it's a good topic to start with.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about Denim Day tomorrow, Leah. Where's that?
Oh, yeah. So Denim Day is tomorrow, which is a day that is a global campaign that even like Levi's is a part of. All these other denim brands are part of, where every last Wednesday of April, they encourage people to wear denim as a way to stand in solidarity with survivors of sexual assault and sexual violence, and to kind of combat this false narrative of what it is, and false definition of consent and all of these things, but really bringing truth to the matter. It was birthed out of this event in Italy years back. We're going on 20 plus years, and it's been an annual thing where the Italian parliament overturned a sexual assault case because the justices deemed that the victim's pants were so tight that she would have had to help her rapist take them off, thus implying consent. So they threw the case out. The very next day, pretty much all the women who worked at Parliament, anyone who was following the case and disagreed and were outraged with the verdict, stood on the steps of the Italian Parliament wearing denim. And it was
Well, she actually did take the jeans off herself. She did take them off because she was afraid of further violence. So she took him off. And because of that, they did not find him guilty.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, Priscilla, because that's a big part that gets missed in this definition of consent too, is people say, well, you didn't say anything, or you didn't stop me, or you took the jeans off, and they don't bring into the conversation the threats, the manipulation, the fear, the fight, flight, and freeze. If I'm in the middle of this traumatic event and my response is to freeze, that's my body protecting itself, my mind protecting itself, but that still doesn't mean I gave you permission.
Right.
And that part gets really overshadowed quite a bit in terms of the gray area, which in all reality there is no gray area when it comes to consent, hence the little bashful bunnies here. Like that there's no gray area, and that's something that we're redefining. And I think a lot of the movements that have happened recently and the awarenesses that have really increased have brought a big spotlight on this issue, and I'm glad that we're talking about it today. So yeah, tomorrow, wear your denim. Use the hashtags Denim Day 2020. I see Lynn, she's under my screen here. She's got her denim on. Use the hashtag Denim Day 2021. And then Sam, SAAM, for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and kind of help spread the awareness of why it's important to wear denim tomorrow. So thanks, Larry, for bringing that up.
Not a problem.
Yeah, so speaking of consent and looking at the RAIN website, so they actually detail out what is consent when it comes to sexual and sexual activity. Consent is an agreement between participants to engage in sexual activity. Consent should be clearly and freely communicated. A verbal and affirmative expression of consent can help both you and your partner to understand and respect each other's boundaries. And so, Priscilla, I'll pivot on over to you. How important is consent for us to have at the forefront of just individuals and having a mutual respect and understanding for our partners? How important is that for us to have?
It's very important. Did you want me to go into the Senate Bill 967?
Yeah, if you can, or just in general discussion, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's very important. I mean, consent is everything. Yes means yes. It's very clear, right? And in Senate Bill 967, it has set a new standard for how colleges define and respond to cases of sexual assault in California. It was passed in 2014, and it defines consent as an affirmative, conscious, and voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity from both parties. So it's the sexual assault bill. It was passed in September 2014 by Governor Brown. And it's the yes means yes law. California was the first in the nation to define when and how consent can be given. This bill defines consent as an affirmative, conscious, and voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity, and that not saying no isn't a go. It also states that if the person has drugs or alcohol in his or her system or is asleep, they cannot give consent. It also requires training for faculty so victims are not asked inappropriate questions when they file a complaint. And includes counseling and healthcare services for survivors. SB 967 applies to all California post-secondary schools, colleges, and universities, public or private, that receive money for student financial aid. This bill affects how college campuses in California prevent and investigate sexual assaults.
Thank you so much for that. And we often talk about sexual assault, and we often put attention and highlight the impact that this has on women and victims. For the most part, based on percentages, about 97, 98% of victims are women. And so we focused on that. So when we start talking about this notion, and I'll pivot on over to Leah, thank you so much for that. When we talk about women's issues and men's issues, there's this notion that sexual assault really is a man's issue. Let's talk a little bit about what that means and how we shift that attention on over and the impact of that. So Leah, what are your thoughts about about that notion that sexual assault is a man's issue?
Yeah, like I said earlier, is that, or like Priscilla said earlier, it can really touch everybody. Like nobody is immune to this, and the idea that it's a man's issue, that it's they have to take care of it, it's their thing. I do think that there needs to be more discussion amongst men regarding this issue for it to be normalized. There have been a lot more actors that have really stepped up to the plate in terms of discussing this issue, as we are advocates for our communities. We are advocates. We have been blessed with this platform to speak up and to really bring it, not as, I would almost kind of flip it and say it's not a women's issue. It is a community issue that, again, it's important for men to also come up alongside females, but also their fellow men. 1 in 6 men experience sexual assault before the age of 18. And even that statistic is inaccurate because men don't come forward, because we have this idea of toxic masculinity out there that says, well, no, you can't show emotion. You're not supposed to be weak. What do you mean? You're a guy, you can't be vulnerable. Your girlfriend did what to you? Or, hey, your teacher hit on you last night. Like, hey, kudos. This idea of this toxic masculinity, this machismo, this macho-ness, all this stuff really limits survivors, male survivors of sexual assault, from being able to voice, hey, I need help. Hey, this happened to me. Playing ball with their friends on the court, being like, you know what, guys, I need to share something with you, is not normalized enough in our society. And I think that's kind of what we need to do, is start redirecting. And Flavia, I know you shared with the panel a video by Jackson Katz regarding changing the way we even talk about it, is kind of, again, taking the attention off of, again, saying females because that is where the statistics are, taking the narrative away from this happened to this woman to this guy or this person did this, and redirecting the verbiage to where it really does start to include more of the male identifying population to engage in this conversation a lot more. So I don't know, Flavia, did you have anything that you wanted to add regarding that? I know you brought up the Jackson Katz video.
Yeah. In fact, I love how, when it comes to, gender related issues, there's so much attention that's being placed on people who are the victims. Shies away as a culture, as a society, we shy away from putting attention on the behavior that happened with the person who is committing this. Truth be told, it is a crime. It is a crime. And what are some of these behaviors that led to that? In fact, to me, language is everything. How do you address it? So I wanted to share a quick video about Jackson Katz on how he was able to sort of bring that into the fold, and why language is important when we start talking about these narratives and these actions. So give me just a sec.
We changed our careers to go to med school, and we want to let people just like us know you can become a doctor too. At the #1 provider of doctors into first-year U.S. residencies, St. George's University School of Medicine. Are you in?
I'm old school on some fundamental regards. I make films and I work with, high tech, but I'm still old school as an educator. And I want to share with you this exercise that illustrates on the sentence structure level how the way that we think, literally the way that we use language, conspires to keep our attention off of men. This is about domestic violence in particular, but you can plug in other analogs. This comes from the work of the feminist linguist Julia Penelope. It starts with a very basic English sentence. John beat Mary. That's a good English sentence. John is the subject, beat is the verb, Mary is the object. Good sentence. Now we're going to move to the second sentence, which says the same thing in the passive voice. Mary was beaten by John. And now a whole lot has happened in one sentence. We've gone from John beat Mary to Mary was beaten by John. We've shifted our focus in one sentence from John to Mary. And you can see John is very close to the end of the sentence, well, close to dropping off the map of our psychic plane. The third sentence, John is dropped, and we have Mary was beaten, and now it's all about Mary. We're not even thinking about John, it's totally focused on Mary. Over the past generation, the term we've used synonymous with beaten is battered, so we have Mary was battered. And the final sentence in this sequence, flowing from the others, is Mary is a battered woman. So now Mary's very identity, Mary is a battered woman, is what was done to her by John in the first instance. But we've demonstrated that John has long ago left the conversation. Now, those of us who work in domestic and sexual violence field know that victim blaming is pervasive in this realm, which is to say blaming the person to whom something was done rather than the person who did it. And we say things like, why do these women go out with these men? Why are they attracted to these men? Why do they keep going back? What was she wearing at that party? What a stupid thing to do. Why was she drinking with that group of guys in that hotel room? This is victim blaming. And there are numerous reasons for it, but one of them is that our whole cognitive structure is set up to blame victims. This is all unconscious. Our whole cognitive...
All right. So Priscilla, for us to look at this video and sort of start thinking about how we shape our conversations, our dialogue, and the focus. So here, he talks about men just kind of going off that sentence structure, right? Why is it important for us as a society, as a campus, as a norm, to reshift the focus and look at this issue as being a man's issue, as the way Jackson Katz described?
It's important to shift because it's not a man's issue. We need to keep it at the forefront that it's everyone's issue, right? This can happen to anyone. As I mentioned earlier, this can happen to anyone regardless of age, sexual orientation, gender, race, and the shift needs to be on the perpetrator. More so, we need to keep that in the forefront, and language is very important, as Jackson Katz mentioned. The shift needs to be more on the perpetrator and why the perpetrator did what he or she did, and not solely or just on the actions of the victim or survivor. So that shift needs to happen in order to change the way society sees sexual assault.
Yeah. Thank you, Priscilla. Larry, same question. Why is that such a difficult shift to have?
Well, because I think it's, we do talk a lot about being safe and safety and that all that sort of thing. But at the same time, we're trying to focus more on educating men in general that this is their responsibility. It's not just hey, there's perpetrators and these guys got to stop, but it's teams. We talk about sports teams and other kinds of teams that a couple of years ago we had Jackson Katz on campus. And I remember thinking, well, because we actually paid a lot of money to have him come, and we rented out the performance center. So I remember talking to our team going, this guy better be good. And we better fill the place or we're going to look silly. And we completely filled the place. But one of the things we did was we talked to everybody on campus, every nook and cranny on campus, including sports teams. So the coaches got their teams out there, the football team all trundled over there together. And and they hopefully learned that, hey, it's not just, don't be a rapist or a batterer, but it's like, take responsibility for learning about this stuff, but also take responsibility for checking your peers when they start talking like this is okay. And so that hopefully that kind of thing makes a difference. I noticed, like, on our meeting today, there's very few men. Matter of fact, I think it's you and me and Flavio. But and that's a concern.
But it's being recorded, so it'll go out to the entire campus. Hopefully,
Yeah, I mean but that's the concern, is that men and students, and they think it's, well, this is, women should show up in this and learn something. It's really not what it's about. It's like men need to learn something. And we'll talk a little bit more later about the issue of shaming and guilt. And but I can just say something, from a counselor's point of view, that we always try to lead with, this is not your fault, because a lot of times when people are traumatized, any kind of trauma, but especially sexual trauma, there's this guilt thing that's sort of built in, that people can sort of really say, hey, it's my fault, I should have done this, I could have done this, I couldn't have done that, why didn't I do this? And we try to really make it clear that, hey, that guy or that perpetrator had a choice about what they did. They did something. It's not you that did something, it's they did something. And try to help people to get off that guilt and off of that shame, because and embarrassment and humiliation and all that stuff, because that can really lead to serious other kinds of emotional kind of reactions.
Yeah, Larry, thank you so much for that. That guilt and that shame, not just immediately, but long-term. So Leah Parker, I'll pivot on over to you when we talk about that short-term physical, emotional, sexual impact and how it expands into your mental wellness, your emotional, strong sense of self in the long run. Talk to us a little bit about, the impact of sexual assault on individuals.
Yeah, so, and again, a lot of people are familiar with this, but survivors of sexual violence undergo their own form of PTSD. It's very similar to what we see vets come home with. Theirs is slightly different. We actually call it rape trauma syndrome. And it's something that Joanna just put in the chat, is that it does last for years. Again, we think PTSD and we instantly think war vet. We instantly think, they've lost buddies in war. But again, it's PTSD still is important to talk about in terms of, personal trauma and what that looks like. So rape trauma syndrome is very, very similar to, and basically just underneath the umbrella term of PTSD. It is a form that is specific to individuals who have suffered a sexual trauma. The only slight difference that we see is that due to the trauma that they've experienced, they either are super afraid to re-engage in any sexual activity, or they overly engage in sexual activity as a way of regaining control. Is, I don't want anyone to ever have that kind of power over my body, so I'm taking control and I'm going to jump into this and be in control of every sexual encounter I have, and I'm trying to kind of erase that memory with these other memories. And it is something that keeps going. So Flavia, I know that you mentioned the documentary Audrey and Daisy. It is on Netflix. I highly recommend watching it if you haven't watched it. It's about these two young ladies who were sexually assaulted by pretty popular students in their high school. And you just watch the victim blaming just laid on thick, to the point where one of them, and again, I always want to encourage people as we're sharing these stories to be aware of the resources we do have in the chat room for you, as we kind of share these real life experiences, and where one of the girls actually did take her life due to the ongoing victim blaming and slut shaming that she experienced online from her peers. Her house was getting egged. They were saying, you're doing this to ruin their lives. The other young lady, Daisy Coleman, she's probably the most familiar of the ones. Thank you, Joanna, for putting those back in the chat for us. She actually started an organization that is called Safe Bay. We talked about it a little bit in the last meeting that we had, the last session. She started this wonderful, wonderful organization called Safe Bay that is geared towards educating people how to be upstanders when they see sexual assault happening, where they can be upstanders. They're providing that vital information. She actually just took her life this last year. Even after creating these wonderful things, being an advocate for survivors, public speaking. She was still dealing with the trauma of the victim blaming. She was still being tormented online by people saying, you know what, you're still just faking it. Like, even when they were announcing her suicide in newspapers and stuff like that, they're still saying her alleged rape. And there was so much evidence. They were still victim blaming her to the very end. And that trauma that they're experiencing is long term. This was almost a decade after the initial incident. And then on top of that, her mom took her own life shortly after that, because the trauma doesn't just affect the one person, it also affects the entire family. You know, advocating for your child, advocating for your best friend who's gone through this, you know, you also are kind of a target for that victim blaming. Is like, well, you let your daughter do that, you let her do this, you know, you raised this trouble kid and you're just trying to get all, again, it's you instead of I'm here for you. I'm here to support you, and providing that cocoon of support for the family. And so it just goes to show you that it's not just short-term, you know, physical trauma, nightmares, you know, memories popping up all over the place, but it's long-term because it doesn't leave you. Again, a scent brings it back up. A feeling of someone brushing too close to you brings it back up. It's something that constantly is there. And so victim blaming just keeps it there and does not allow for that healing to really begin in some cases as well.
So we know also that, you know, professional help can be beneficial to help with dealing with the trauma, you know, to help dealing with the guilt feelings, the intrusive thoughts, you know, like Leah said, there's flashbacks and nightmares and, you know, but there's also avoidance and numbness and anxiety. And, you know, you can have these dissociations, like out of body experiences, like, or derealization, where you feel like the world is not even real, and easily started, we call it hypervigilance, sleep problems. And when it comes to family, you know, when somebody becomes depressed, they might become very introverted or very angry and irritable. And the family may not even know that somebody's been through this trauma. So even if they know, then they're walking the walk with them. But a lot of times people don't talk about it. Yeah. So that can affect family and relationships also, you know, and when you can't sleep or you're sleeping too much, yeah, you know, you might start working with substance abuse to sort of help with that sort of stuff. It can really lead to long-term depression, long-term anxiety, and like Leah says, suicidal ideation. It's not uncommon at all to have those kind of thoughts like that. Here's the answer. I can't take, you know, the pain and the anguish of this experience. So, you know, it's certainly important to talk to somebody you trust, you know, to just to help, you know, with reality testing. And but, you know, we also, you know, recommend, you know, if there's been this kind of trauma, some kind of professional kind of help can be beneficial. So Joanna's put some of those resources in the chat. And you should know that we have a personal counseling program right here at CLC that's free for students. And for staff, we have our employee assistance program that, you know, Flavio can help you with. And Priscilla is one of our therapists that has expertise in this. So we have, you know, we have expertise. We have, I see Fran and Abby are on the line. We have real expertise in helping people with these kinds of issues, but also connecting them with resources like Leah's program at Child and Family Center.
And in the short term, survivors can experience shock, denial, self-hatred, self-blame. I have a client right now who, for the longest time, she feels dirty. And she just does not like her body at all. She has disconnected herself from her body because of what happened to her. And this happened to her when she was 7 years old, and she repressed it. And now all these memories are coming back up. And she still feels to this day that her perpetrator is sitting on the bed next to her. And so, this is very long-term. And as Larry mentioned, psychotherapy can help. EMDR has been proven to be a really good intervention for sexual assault survivors. So the short term, you can develop, feelings of guilt, self-blame, shock, denial, self-hatred, anxiety, long-term depression, and also that long-term depression can lead to having suicidal ideation and ultimately, dying by suicide. But there is help, and yeah, we are here at the health center also to help those who have experienced sexual assault.
Another thing that we've talked about in some of our planning and some of the things that Priscilla and I are talking about and some of the trainings we're doing is that if you anywhere connected to Santa Clarita at all, you've experienced multiple traumas in the last several years. Last year, we're talking about beyond the COVID thing. That's big enough, right? But we had the Saugus shooting. We have all the civil unrest and the coverage about what happened to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all that. And that continues to sort of assault us in a way. But for those of African American or some minority communities, Asian American Pacific Islanders, it's like anguish, on top of everything else, with election distress and then there's the fires. We have the Las Vegas shootings, the borderline shootings, all these things. We're seeing people trying to sort of come to terms with that in our counseling program, but we're all kind of dealing with it, right? And now we're kind of coming back amidst all this. So when you put sexual trauma or domestic violence on top of all that, you really get, a real, I want to say witch's brew is the word that comes up, but it's more complicated than that, obviously. And so just to be aware that that's what's going on out there, and we need to take care of ourselves. Our well-being is certainly being challenged here, but people who have been through or in domestic violence or sexual assault are especially challenged these days.
Thank you so much
Thank you, April, for saying that.
Resources. Yeah, for providing all those resources. Leah, jump on in. What are some resources? I know we've got like about 5 minutes left from our session. What are some resources that our campus community can utilize from Child and Family Domestic Violence Program that you're part of?
Yeah, domestic violence program. We can definitely help in terms of survivors who have experienced sexual violence from their dating partner or their spouse or whoever they're cohabitating with. We are able to assist there because a lot of times people think that, marital rape and, interpersonal relationship rape does not happen. They think, well, if you're with that person for that long, then, it's really not considered rape. But we all know about the manipulation, the gaslighting, the coercion, the fear, the threats that play into it. So we can definitely help in terms of that. I think as part of the chat kind of resource blurb that we put on there, our number is available on there. We also have a 24-hour hotline that is available that can always get you linked into services right away. We are only open Monday through Friday, so that weekend time is a perfect time. It's 259-HELP, area code 661. That's a really great one. And then we also partner very closely and tend to refer quite often to also Strength United. They have a agency location here in Newhall. That is a wonderful resource for anyone as well who is seeking out groups specific to sexual violence. They have a wonderful array of information. I don't have my keyboard attached to my screen, so I don't know if anybody would be able to drop in the website for Strength United, but that is there as well. So there's a plethora of resources available. RAIN.org is a great one. You can kind of type in your zip code and find a good amount of resources there too. And then on campus, I know that you guys have a group of individuals. I know especially with Title IX in terms of sexual harassment, sexual violence, and I will have to defer over to someone from COC to kind of share where they can access that. But I know that that is another place that when we have college students come to us, we tend to refer to them as well for that on-campus support.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Leah. So with a few minutes, in fact, we actually, a part of the thread of resources that we have available, we do include the Strengths United phone number, as well as the National Sexual Assault Hotline and the National Domestic Violence Hotline as well, and the National Lifeline Suicide number as well.
Hi, Flavio, I actually got a question in the chat regarding the personal counseling services that our Student Health and Wellness Center provides. They're just asking how many sessions are provided, and if they register for summer, would they be able to access that resource?
So we offer 6 to 8 or more sessions. And yes, if they are registered for summer sessions, they can access our services. Every semester, we offer 6 to 8 or more sessions per semester, provided that the student is registered in a credit or a non-credit course.
And just to be clear in the announcement that these sessions do not cost the student anything as long as they are registered with the campus.
Well, they are paid through their health fees.
Right.
All right. Thank you all so much. Panel, last minute words for us to walk away from. I know we've got about like 3 minutes left. April, I'll start with you. Campus awareness, sexual assault awareness. What are some things we can do? Walk away, key takeaways.
I think one of the most important things is, if you see behavior that is, not okay, do something. A lot of the problem is we've kind of accepted it as a society. We allow people to joke about it. We allow people to make comments. And that's honestly the best place to start, is to stop allowing it.
Thank you for that. Joanna.
Yeah, I think, coming from campus life perspective, there's always so much that we can be doing, right? And just kind of like piggybacking on what April was saying, just continuing to be proactive, right? Like we had that campaign a few years ago, if you see something, say something, that falls under that umbrella. And so I think just continue to educate the campus and our local communities about this, and not having it be, and it is a difficult topic to talk about, but I feel like the more we normalize this conversation, the easier it will be to have that conversation, obviously in a respectful manner. But yeah, I think just we have a lot of work to do, but there's a lot that each of us can do.
Thank you so much for that, Joanna. Lynn.
I think it's just important to know your resources and to be able to point people towards the resources, and you yourself to be brave to seek out those resources. I know it takes a lot to come forward, but I really do want to encourage you all to seek out the resources that you need. And, if you have a friend that's refusing, a good tactic is always to say, hey, I'll walk with you. I'll take you over there. Let's go together. And even in that, you're validating that you believe what they're telling you.
Thank you for that, Lynn. That is so important and valuable. Priscilla.
So my takeaway from this is that this conversation needs to be continued, and it needs to happen more than it does, because this is an epidemic And we need to do better. That's my takeaway.
Thank you so much. And thank you, April, for being here. Larry, we're just wrapping up the session. Any key takeaways from the presentation that you can share?
Sorry, my computer froze, so I'm back.
No worries.
No, it kind of what Priscilla said. This is like this needs to happen on a large scale. We need to make sure it's not just a college, but also our whole community. It's an issue for everybody to be aware of, and so not just the men's, women's, LGBTQ, military, or anything. It's in everybody's issue.
Thank you for reminding us of that, Larry. Thank you. Leah Parker, take us out.
One thing I always tend to share is embrace the awkward moment of making sure that whatever situation you think may not be okay is be willing to step in and say, hey, I know this may be okay, but I'm still checking in and saying something. And one of my favorite scenarios is if you're at a party and you walk into a room and you're like, oh, sorry, still open that door back up and make sure everyone in that room is safe. That's a big part of this conversation, is being willing to step up, say something, and kind of echoing what all the other panelists have shared is don't be afraid to speak up, because someone's life honestly does depend on it. Their mental wellness depends on it. And one moment of awkward uncomfortableness could be the one moment that person needed. So again, being an advocate is not supposed to be easy, but it's definitely necessary. And Flavio, do you have anything you want to share?
No, just thank everybody. I know that this is a super serious and very sensitive topic to talk about, especially, when you're talking about rape culture, sexual assault, we don't talk about it. So the fact that we're having this campus discussion, we're having it recorded, what it means, the impact, short-term, long-term, the fact that we're engaging in this conversation, sort of normalizing it, and we hope, and we pray, like Kesha's song, that there are some self-reflective moments. If you are a bystander and you see something, you kind of find the courage and the strength within yourself to say something and step up for someone who may not have that voice within themselves. And on the other hand, if you are someone who maybe you are insecure, vulnerable, or you feel like you're vulnerable, there's a place for you. There's a voice that somehow is inside all of us that stands up and says, stop. Enough. And I'm hoping that these conversations do exactly that. So again, thank you all so much. I'm gonna stop the recording